Your journey has been an interesting one up to here. You've questioned so much more than those around you. You've even questioned yourself as to how you could have grown into these thoughts. Am I crazy? When did I begin to think differently? Why do people in general appear so limited in their thought process? Rest assured, you are not alone. The world is slowly waking up to what you already know inside, yet can't quite verbalize. Welcome to the Spiritual Dope Podcast. The show that answers the questions you never even knew to ask, but needed the answers to. Questions about you, this world, the people in it. Most importantly, how do I proceed now moving forward? We don't claim to have all the answers, but we sure do love living in the question. Time for another hit of Spiritual Dope with your host, Brandon Henley. Let's get right into today's episode.
Hey there, Spiritual Dope. This is the first podcast I've recorded in the new year. Welcome. I'm not sure when it's going to be out there, but David and I have been trying to connect here for a bit now. Had to push off a little bit in December, but I've got Dave Florence, who I found through YouTubing and looking for 20-minute breathwork sessions, because that's all I wanted. That's all I could really tolerate in my day to day. Turns out David, had some great sessions. I listened to him today, so it's been like 6 months, David. I've been listening to your stuff, so thank you for putting it out there. And he's also a Soma breath practitioner, Wim Hof breath practitioner. Evolution of Dave is your YouTube channel. And, you've got some really great content that's so helpful, practical, and applicable to us in our current state of the world. So thanks for being on, David.
Hey there, Spiritual Dope. Today we changed the format here just a little bit. Dave and I got done with our conversation, and some other stuff came up, and I was like, you know what? Let's just go ahead and put this in the beginning, so that it really gives you an introduction of who Dave was before he is who he is today. Super pertinent to the listener, super pertinent to me, him, the journey, and to anyone in this space. Take a listen, weave it in, and then we'll jump into the regular beginnings.
Right. You were saying, did you drink? Were you a pretty heavy drinker before doing all this stuff? And then
I was called Vodka
kind of
Dave.
put your world upside down. Vodka Dave. So you found. So let me just. I want to weave this in there somewhere. So, Vodka Dave, and again, the similarities are so striking, and because let me tell you, I used to live in a really nice neighborhood, and I live in a nice neighborhood now, but like where I used to live, it was a nice community. We all hung out with each other all the time. We all drank and partied with each other all the time, and I used to make my own beer, my own wine, whatever. And 9 times out of 10, you would see me with a beer in my hand, right? Mm-hmm. It didn't really matter what kind of time it was or whatever. And I had a water in my hand one morning. It's like a Saturday morning. Neighbor's like, well, what are you doing? Are you drinking water? I was like, yeah, I'm drinking water. And I was like, that was a point for me where I was like, I don't want to be known as the dad that's drinking beer all the time. Yeah. Like that's, right? I was like, that's not what I'm about. Like this. So what needs to change here again? So let's just, I want to rewind a little bit there. So tell me a little bit, Dave, about Vodka Dave.
Vodka Dave, if I talk about him in the third person, because that's how people would talk about it, actually. So especially when I was living in London, people would, let's say there was a party or some kind of event, people would come up to me and say, is Vodka Dave coming? So right. I'd go, yeah, of course. And this is the thing, I think people considered me boring unless I was Vodka Dave. And I had attached that appreciation to my own psychology to a point where if it was a party or some kind of event, I could only be Vodka Dave. Because that was the mask that I needed in order to feel comfortable. Now, luckily, Vodka Dave was a very fun character. He was always happy, never got into any negative trouble, only positive trouble. So, there is a certain...
Describe positive trouble to me, Dave.
Well, there is a certain posh club in London that did have a very large chandelier hanging on the ceiling. They probably have a replacement chandelier, but at one point I was swinging from it. So, and it definitely was not, well, you wouldn't do that anywhere anyway, let's face it. But yeah, that was, that
Everything Vodka Dave might do.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, I think, sorry, go on.
Well, the bang to the head, was this a Vodka Dave incident?
Yes, I think it was. In fact, I know it was. But I don't know how it happened. I don't know if I was beaten up. I don't know if I fell down some steps. I have no idea. And in fact, 5 hours of the night are totally lost to me. I don't know what happened during that period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it just goes to show, I think, how, you hit on spirituality, you hit on the who we are now, right? You and I, who we are now, isn't who we've always been. There's a pathway there that not everybody wants to take, right? You don't have to take, Vodka Dave's route. You don't have to take, Brandon, drinking beer all the time route. There's a path to this space without having to go there. But a lot of times we've been that person. We've gone through that space and we come out, we're here now. Yes, we're very evangelical about breath work, exercise, read, learn all you can. But at one point we were gargling, in the morning with vodka or Jim Beam or something else. And so I put that out there because if Vodka Dave can do it, if I can do it, and I'm not saying you have to go out and stop drinking or continue doing what you're doing, but just know that that's not the end product, right? That that's right.
And also I think, there's a reason why you're doing it. You're doing it because you're unhappy with who you are. You haven't accepted who you are, and you're willing to present who you are to other people. There's something that needs fixing. So if you can be a drunk and be totally happy with who you are, then maybe that's your journey. Maybe that's your path. But most of the time we do this because we don't want to be the other person, because the other person's either too boring or maybe hasn't got anything to say, isn't fun. So yeah, that's all it is, really, isn't it? I think it just comes down to, who do I want to be? And am I happy with this person? Right. Do I know who this person is? Because that's what the work does. That's what the practice does, isn't it? Thank you. I appreciate being here. I'm very grateful. Thank you. And thanks for your kind words.
For sure. And the other piece I'll share with everybody before we get going, David also has he's got a space on Facebook. It's got a 90-day YouTube challenge that I took and went through 90 days. I think that Dave suggested they be consecutive. Mine were not. All the same, it was a great space and a great experience to be in there with Dave as he, encouraged me and many others along through the 90-day challenge. So, David, I'll also like to thank you for that while we're here.
No problem. It's an interesting experience, isn't it? So for those listening,
100%.
It's I think it's actually good for anybody to do. The whole idea, the premise of it was to see if we can get more people interested in putting their workout, their breath workout on YouTube. But when you think about the practice itself of committing to uploading and creating or going live in a video every day for 90 days, the commitment itself is the crucial bit that has a knock-on effect with your psychology, in that you start to develop the real authentic you in front of the camera. And this is what I learned when I did the same exercise, that when in front of a camera, I think we all have a tendency of wearing the mask, the actor's mask, the presenter's mask. And by committing to doing this video every day, you eventually become the real, authentic, genuine you. But I think also what some people find with doing this this exercise is, yes, they start to hopefully create ideas for their content, but sometimes also people start to get a better understanding of themselves. Because once you get to a point where you no longer care what you say and what you look like, often then the spilling out in this stream of consciousness, flow of rambling chit chat, is that you start to reveal to yourself some of the inner work. You start rambling away, and then it veers off in a direction because you don't care anymore. You're not thinking about the listener and whether they find you interesting. You're just flowing with it. And so I think that's great if you are creating a YouTube channel, but it's great, I think, from a psychological perspective as well. I think it can be, a sort of a healing tool if you want it to be.
Sure. No, I love it. Everything that you're saying there resonates with me. I think that one of the things that I think of when you're saying that is Bob Proctor has R.I.P. Bob Proctor. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he had this exercise that he would say, hey, the problems that I have right now, I like to get them all out of my head and onto this piece of paper, right? And so he would say, all right, are all my problems in my head or are they on this piece of paper? And he would do this exercise until all of his problems were on like this piece of paper. He'd gotten everything kind of dumped out in there. And I think that that's really similar process with this, right? Like here's how I want to communicate. Here's what I want to say. You've been on, you've listened to me ramble plenty of times. People on this podcast have listened to me ramble plenty of times.
You've got beautiful rambles, by the way. I love them.
I appreciate it. But you find that like there's this other tangent, and you're like, oh, but wait, there's just one more piece that will help make this whole. And similar to kind of what you're saying there, right? You get this opportunity to let things out that have been contained for so long. And you're like, wow, hold on a second. Not only did that sound good, wait till they hear what I got to say next, right? Or here's who I actually am, and it's all unfolding right here. So again, appreciate you creating that space and making that a possibility. Had a blast. I literally just finished it at the end of the new year as promised. So David, let's just jump into it a little bit, right? You've got a breathwork practice. You've been doing it for quite some time. I've got a breathwork practice. I'm fairly new to it. You've got some stories I'd love to dig into. Let me just ask you, where did you first find breathwork for yourself, and what made it something that you wanted to know more about?
So I had a dramatic entrance into the breathwork world. In 2017, I had a bang to the head. It was quite literally a bang, a literal bang to the head. During a drunken night out, I lost about 5 hours in the night. I was found by the side of the road, taken to hospital. It wasn't that bad, but it was enough of a bang that the next day I wanted to do something to optimize my mind and my body. I had this thought of, hang on a minute, I'm a father of a young child, I'm a husband, this is not how one acts, and I was berating myself, and I if I often say to people, if I was a Catholic back in the Middle Ages, I would be there with my flail whipping myself. It was that kind of psychology I wanted. And luckily at the time, although he wasn't that popular at the time, Wim Hof was putting out videos on cold therapy, and I thought, that's what I need. It was December, it was -10 outside, so I went in the garden, grabbed the garden hose, poured cold water over me, was naked as well, and that's exactly what I needed, and I'm sure my neighbors did too, for amusement.
Sure.
But
That's great.
So along with the cold therapy, obviously with the Wim Hof method, they do promote breath work, and that's when I got into it. So late 2017, after 2 months of doing the Wim Hof method breath work, I was hooked. So hooked, I was going through the highs that you all go through when you start doing this practice with commitment and discipline. And I was screaming from the rooftops. I was telling all my friends about it. None of them would listen, obviously. I was being very evangelical. And that's when I created my YouTube channel, because I wanted to tell people I was in such a great state. I was saying, everybody should do this. This is amazing. So that's when I created Evolution of Dave, because I saw this as being a catalyst to change. I saw this as this is me putting a stake in the ground, and I'm now going to optimize my mind and my body. Initially, it was with breath work, and then a whole load of practices after that. But that was really my entrance into breath work. This thing that I'm now able to look back and think that happened for a reason. that was one of life's messages. I needed that in order to be this. So I'm grateful for it now.
No, I get it. Real similar, kind of line in the sand, I guess, in terms of, and almost timeline of stepping into these practices. Myself, similar. I did not fall down with a bang to the head, but I drank enough, and I was like, "Is this really? Is this really who I want my children to see? Is this really I've got 2 boys." I was like, and if they are going to use me as their model, is this the model that I should have in front of them? And it was really around 2017. It's funny, but I said, yeah, no. It's time? How can what changes do I want to make so that I can be a better model? If not, I'm not the best, right? But how can I be a better model for my children? And that was a starting point for me. So let's talk about the highs that you mentioned. What do you mean by that? Like, the highs from breath work or some of the other stuff?
Yeah, so akin to the kind of highs I would have experienced when I was a raver back in the day. We're talking early 90s. I would do all the things, without putting it into words, I would do all the things that you did when you would spend 20 hours dancing.
Yeah, man, I'm super familiar.
Yeah, there's a lot of us out there. And so whilst they weren't necessarily the same intensity, some of the highs that I was getting were this very elated feeling, sort of, when I was saying, shouting from the rooftops, that's what I felt like doing. I wanted to get outside the front of the house and go, "Hey, everybody, you should do this. It's amazing." I was in that state. I didn't care what people thought.
100%. Yeah.
But also, obviously, when I started to push the rounds into 4-5 round territory, by then I was doing Soma breath, which I preferred because it was the music, the isochronic tones that enhanced that experience. And I love the music because, of course, that still took me back to the days of raving as well. Not that it's all like that, but you know what I mean? Some of it is with a very specific rhythm. And when you start doing the 4-5 rounds, you do then get these out of or altered state experiences. So, as you describe it like a high, that is quite a good descriptive, I suppose, to that experience. You're left afterwards going, okay, yeah, you're in a beautiful floaty state. You've had some visions, or at least visuals, albeit light, during the sort of 4th and 5th round, maybe. And you come out of it almost as if you've just been given some insight sometimes as well. Not always, but sometimes you think, okay, yeah, I've figured something out, I think. So
you've got a really nice, I forget which one of your Soma breath works that you do, but you talk about whatever's coming to you in this moment, use this for today. What do you want this day to look like? And there are visualizations that come through, or a lot of people like to call them downloads, but these insights that kind of come when we've been putting so much effort into life, right? And then when we sit down and we do these breathwork moments or these breathwork meditations, and then something comes to us and it's so easy and effortless. We're like you said, it's like, why isn't everybody doing this? Why aren't we all talking about it? I share this breath work with a group of guys at a sober house. And one of the things I talk to them about is say, well, imagine, like you talked about, going to the party, doing the rave all night, dance for 20 hours or whatever. Imagine, you kind of get a super similar feeling to that, but then you can get back up and go back to work. Right? You're not incapacitated for 4 to 8 hours, right? We're like, So I always make that joke with those guys. And like you said, these altered states of experiences, when we talk about that, and you and I being in this rave scene, I always liken it to it's an altered state, but it's almost better, right? Because it's hyper clean we just created it within ourselves. We are
Yeah.
the chemical factory.
You're in a pharmacy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so being able to do that and kind of come out of it, it's amazing. I love being able to do it. Well, now how are you using this to, optimize your own life? What are some of the benefits that you've received after you found it?
Well, interestingly, I would say 3 months in of doing this kind of intense breath work every day, I realized I was beginning to develop this insatiable appetite for learning. And also it felt like my memory had improved. At the time, I thought that was something to do with the bang to the head. I genuinely thought I've had one of those, I think they call them the sort of idiot savant moments where, you have a bang to the head and all of a sudden you become this incredible artist. So I was thinking, oh, maybe that's what's happened. Something's been knocked in my right hemisphere, the creative bit. But then after obviously doing more research, and that's what my journey has been about since 2017. It's learning practices, research, playing with it. That's crucial from my perspective, is what I teach others, to really play with this stuff, explore, experiment, and then you won't ever give up. And what I was discovering was that I was, not only did I have this insatiable appetite for learning, so I was, getting book after book, but I had a capacity for remembering it as well. And this was never, I hadn't experienced this before. Sure. And then when I looked at the research, there's various bits of research that indicate that things like spatial memory improves through doing this kind of breath work. So I realized, okay, right, so it's down to the breath work. And that's why the breath work has just run like a clean vein day after day for the last 5 and a bit years, because I've always known the power of it. And then obviously when you start exploring lots of other forms of breath work, you realize that you can get a breath work for creating energy. You can use breath work for preparing your mind for a presentation. You can use breath work to calm the nervous system. There's a whole load of different practices that you can learn that are really good for different kind of situations. So not only did I get that sort of cognitive benefit, but then I realized I could add these into my imaginary toolbox. So I've got this box of tricks that I can turn to under given situations. But all of that, I have to say, when I'm teaching people on a one-to-one, quite often what I'm saying to them is, it's all very well me teaching you this stuff, but you've got to retain it, you've got to remember it. And I think the problem that we find now in today's society is that we are awash with potential practices and ideas and methods that could optimize us, that could heal us. And we pick up a book and we read it and we go, wow, that was amazing. I'm going to use that technique. And we do so for a month. And then we forget it because we've picked up another one. And we see the next shiny object. The crucial thing is when you realize and recognize that breathwork is so powerful, you've got to say to yourself, right, how do I therefore make that a part of who I am? So not that I see it like a chore. In other words, I should do this, I must do this, that kind of psychology before then doing the breath work. You've got to figure out, how do I make this a part of who I am and how I flow through life? And that's what I realized early on, that I've got to find ways of making this stuff stick because I want to keep this. The intention was, this is now me, and this is how I flow and move through life with these techniques. So I think a lot of people listening will have tried breathwork, but I would imagine there'll be lots that have probably stopped. And this conversation will go, oh yeah, I forgot I was doing that.
Oh, sure. And I love what you're saying there too, right? We, you get to this certain point. I never got to a point myself where my memory got a lot better, but I got to this point where, and this is before breathwork, this insatiable desire to learn and just pull in an amazing amount of content, right? And then one shiny object to another. Oh, this will make me amazing. I'll go do this. This will make me amazing. I'll go do that. This is, and so that is a real challenge. How have you been able to implement it, like you're saying, as a part of who you are, integrate it into the whole of who you are, and maintain it, stick with it?
Yeah. So apologies for dying in the background there. I've got
You pulled
time. Through. Yeah, I've got. I had a little tickle on my throat earlier today, so I decided to make myself a warm drink with honey, organic thyme, and lemon. But the cup is full of thyme seeds, and I think they went down the wrong way. So anyway,
they'll save you or they'll kill you.
Exactly. So how do I make this stick? Well, let me tell you what I teach others. First of all, it is this whole looking at the intention behind it, asking yourself, why am I doing this? Am I doing it because it's the latest fad? Am I doing it because somebody else has suggested it? Am I doing it because, I just tried that experience, it's given me a really good high? Because if those are the reasons, you've got to look at your intention behind it. That you hear so many stories of people doing the Wim Hof method or Soma breath. 3 months in, they give up because their neurochemical changes have altered. Their body has adapted, and they're not getting the same highs as they were before. And so therefore they give up. And of course, that tells me that their only reason for doing it was because of the highs, because of these amazing feelings. When really you should look at the intention deeper and look at the spiritual benefits, the inner work that you can get from doing this practice. So when that would be tip number one. Look at breath work as a means of developing a better understanding of yourself, of knowing that these practices will have a huge physiological benefit, improving your immunity, improving your circulatory system, improving your ability to sense others and sense things, your ability to tap into a meditative state without meditating. There's so many benefits. So you need to tune into that and understand those, so that when you're doing it, that this at no point does it feel like a chore. Because again, if you start to say these words to yourself of, you've just woken up, I should do this, I ought to do this. Well, that's the wrong terminology. That's the wrong language. And that will lead you to giving up, because already you said to yourself, I'm doing this for other reasons, not because it resonates, not because it feels good. And then the other thing is,
if I wake up in the morning and I find myself saying, I should do this, I should do that, what should I be saying to myself instead?
Well, this is where you need to, first of all, understand why you're doing it. So understand the intention. And this is the thing you need to look at, first of all, because that's the key to the language that you use.
Well, like what would be an example then? So I guess if my intention for the breath work is to become better in sports, what language would I use then?
Yeah, so, let me tell you the language that I use. So when I wake up in the morning, I say to myself, I intend to move, breathe, flow through this day using all the tools that I have that make me feel good, or something along those lines, I know instinctively through the practice that there are many benefits to why I do the breath work, physiological and psychological. So therefore, at no point do I say I should do this or I ought to do it, because I've got to a point now where my body and mind has accepted this practice. So it's, you don't even have to use the word breath work when you look at your intention setting in the morning. I intend to flow through this day, making use of all the practices I know that will enable me to do so. When you look at it from that external perspective of wanting to flow, reaching flow states or wanting to flow through the day, then you already know, if you've been practicing it, that breath work will be one of those tools. So will exercise, so will movement flow, so will ritual, so will, a whole load of other things. But you don't need to label them all. You just need to say to yourself, I intend to flow through this day, knowing that by the end of it, I can end the day with a smile on my face, knowing that I've achieved, knowing that I've done the things I want to do. Don't be specific about it, because your body knows. If you've already connected and resonated with the breath work, then you know that is who you are. That's what you do. You don't think before the action. That is just who you are. So, for example, when I roll out of bed, I roll onto the floor and I do a very easy flowing 5 Tibetan rites yoga routine. It's the simplest of all yoga, easy to do, and it wakes the whole body up. There's no significant stretches because you don't want to stretch too hard in the morning when you wake up anyway. And then because you breathe through that exercise, that really leads me then into the breath work. You know, at the end of that last Tibetan rites, I'm on my back. I've been breathing through every move. So I then seamlessly move from that yoga into starting off with a 4-8 breathing pattern. Sometimes listening to music, sometimes I don't, I just do it, you know, without any kind of influence or stimuli. I just do it before I then move into the cold shower and do all the other lovely things that I do.
No, I like that. I like that. So you've got basically a mantra. You wake up, an intention setting for the day that is all inclusive of like if you say, hey, I intend to move and breathe and flow through the day. You've already created your mind already says, hey, that's attached to breath work. That's attached to the shower. That's attached to the yoga. And if he sees himself, you know, doing this other line, right? I intend to breathe, flow, and you see yourself ending that day that way. You've created a visualization that sets the mind already in action first thing of the day.
Exactly. And so I also used initially another tool called habit stacking. I don't know if you've come across that.
That's the beginning of my journey as well. It's very funny. That was the very beginning. Trying to think of the article because I still remember the article. It doesn't exist anymore, but the article talked about habit stacking, and that's when I hadn't read books in like decades, right? Like, well, if you just read like 20 pages a day, you know, get the habit, you know, and do this and do that, and you do this habit stacking. I'll let you share a little bit more about what it is, but that was the beginning of my journey, habit stacking. Share more about it though, David. I haven't shared it too much on this podcast at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's the simplest of tools, but probably one of the most powerful for getting you to do the stuff you really want to do. So all it does is taps into a mind state in which you are in a state of acceptance in doing that one task that you're doing at the time. And really what you're doing is you are hacking the mind, you might say. So let's say everybody has at least one thing they do every day without fail that they know will serve them from a health perspective. Let's say brushing your teeth, for example. Everybody does it. And when they do it, they don't think before they do it. They don't think, oh, I've got to brush my teeth. I mean, they might do when they're a child and they might need prodding when they're a child. But when they're an adult, you just do it, don't you? You don't think before you do it. You don't think whilst you're doing it. Your body and mind have totally accepted that that is a good thing to do because it's healthy, it's good for your oral health, etc., etc. So all you do is, when you're brushing your teeth, bearing in mind that at that point your mind is in this wonderful state of acceptance. Oh yeah, I'm just doing, you know, you're not even thinking about it. So all you do whilst you're brushing your teeth is you say, after I've brushed my teeth, I will ... whatever this thing is that you want to build into your life that you know would be good for you, that would be healthy. So let's say, for example, it might be a cold shower. It could be breath work, depending on when you brush your teeth. And so you are making use of the brain state, of this acceptance brain state. And you're, in a way, you're tricking it because you're saying to yourself, oh, well, whilst I'm at it, I may as well do this. You know, you're obviously in the right state at the moment. I won't tell you that I'm trying to trick you in any way, but whilst you're in that state, well, let's just slip a cold shower in afterwards, or let's do some breath work. So it's almost like the brain is going, yeah, cool, man, you know, whatever you say, because I'm in the state of acceptance. And then, you know, you do that a few times and that's it, it's dialed in. Your brain doesn't then question it after a while. Yeah. So, and then, of course, it's called habit stacking, because what you then do is you go, okay, let me see if I can slip another one in after this. And so you say, after I've brushed my teeth and after I've had my cold shower, I will ... And you add the next thing that you want to build into your life. So simple.
Yeah. I think I think that what did we add in? Like we weren't, my wife and I weren't great at making the bed, right? And I added that, and of course, the Admiral, whatever his name is, to make your bed story. I was like, well, if I make my bed, it's like one of the easiest things I can do in the day. That's a win. Like if I just start my day by winning like that, come on now, right? So, and it became part of the habit stack. So I love that. Love that you're using that. Now, you were able to throughout your practices, throughout all the benefits, as you're optimizing yourself and you're learning, you're habit stacking. I don't know exactly how you came across it, but I did hear that you were able to, and I've read plenty of it, Buteyko method and others, to cure your asthma. Could you share a little bit about, kind of how that worked out?
Yeah, it was really cool actually, because when I was a child, I had a little bit of it. I definitely had a lot of things like hay fever. I became very allergic to horses, so I had to stop riding horses. And then it kind of dissipated, and I was fine as an adult until I moved to a town or city rather called Bath, it sits in a bowl. It's surrounded by hills, and it collects all this dirty air. And whilst out running, I began to develop this exercise-induced asthma. And it was getting worse and worse. And then I was given the medication and told that, I'm going to have to continue using that for life, et cetera, et cetera. With the breath work, the more I delved into the breath work, one of the books that I read early on was called The Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McKeown. There's loads of good breathwork books out there now, and that is an amazing book, but it's a bit dry for a beginner. You want to read Breath by James Nestor because that's such an easy flowing read. Patrick McKeown's book is full of information, and in that book he touched on Buteyko and the Buteyko method, a Russian that had created this method, of which one of its benefits is to heal or cure asthma. Now, what's wonderful in this country, and I say this with an element of sarcasm, is that most GPs, general practitioners, medical doctors, really still are reliant on pharmaceuticals to aid anybody's health. And they don't really understand or want to understand anything that might be alternative. So through the use, and I don't know how many months it took me, 3 or 4 months, through the use of Buteyko, a lot of and also the Wim Hof method, I think is part reason for healing myself. The reason why those types of breath work for asthma is all to do with breath holds. And it's all to do with gaining a tolerance to carbon dioxide, which, by the way, is interesting because if you develop a tolerance for higher levels of carbon dioxide, that correlates with your tolerance to deal with higher levels of stress. So, you learn breath work, develop a tolerance to higher levels of carbon dioxide in the body, and you will hopefully find that you are better able to deal with stress. But anyway, when you do certain breath work, not only are you playing with oxygen and carbon dioxide, but also nitric oxide, not nitrous, it's not the stuff that makes you high, nitric oxide, which also has this vasodilatory effect, opens up the blood vessels, again, making it easier for you to breathe. So these breathwork practices eventually optimize my my ability to breathe. And when I went back to the doctor and I said, look, I don't think I need this medication anymore. And she said, don't be so silly. And she said, okay, well, we'll run some tests. And then very quickly she said, Mr. Florence, you're right. I don't know how you've done it, but you're right. You don't need this medication. And I said, can you give me a letter that says that? And so she did. And obviously I proudly then presented this letter.
You're certified healthy. Dave, what is, talk talk a little bit about what the Buteyko method is if somebody's not familiar with it. Like what does that practice look like?
Yeah, so a lot of it is to do with breath holds, as I say. You've got various different practices, such as walking and holding your nose. There's just various methods of holding your breath whilst either moving. There's also various different techniques where, and in fact they teach this with Soma breath as well, where you are deliberately clenching your nose and moving your head around. So it's overall, it's all about increasing your awareness of your breath, but also improving your ability to ventilate. Yeah, I suppose that's probably Buteyko would probably give you a much better description, but I suppose that's the right way of describing it.
For sure. Thanks for sharing that, because it's interesting. Like you said, you get so excited about everything that can be done with the breath work. You're like, oh, tell me what your problems are, and we can probably cure that with breath work. We can probably get you started down the right path with some. Have you tried breath work? Have you? You know what I mean? So when you get down and you get down to it, there's not a lot of our everyday maladies that can't be improved in some way or another by the way that we breathe.
Yeah, especially because you've got inhale breath holds and you've got exhale breath holds. And one of the things that Buteyko breathing does is makes use of the exhale breath hold. It's not quite as intense as, say, the Wim Hof method or Soma breath, where you're doing lots of hyperventilating first. With the Buteyko method, for example, you just simply breathe normally 3 or 4 times, and then you do a relaxed exhale, and then you hold your breath. And the key to it is when you get that first urge to breathe, you then inhale through your nose. If at that first urge you breathe through the nose and you find it really difficult and you have to breathe through the mouth, then you've held your breath for too long. You've held your breath for too long, rather. So Buteyko, the actual method itself is quite simple, but like I said, it is all to do with breath holds. And you're right. It's interesting how you can just through the process of holding your breath either on an inhale breath hold or an exhale breath hold, or deliberately hyperventilating, which for a lot of people sounds like it's counterintuitive, counterproductive, but actually that can super enhance the benefits of breath work. And you start to experience and play with levels of hypoxia, reducing the oxygen in your body for brief periods. And in fact, a friend of mine who I've gotten to know, I've not met in the real world, only online, a lovely lady, I've appeared on her channel a couple of times, called AJ. She's doing some research at the moment where the breath work that you and I know, and that is Wim Hof Soma breath, where you are effectively causing or deliberately experiencing hypoxic or a hypoxic environment. She's doing some research to see whether the results of that could be the equivalent to doing high altitude training. So, most athletes will do high altitude training, as we know.
Right.
What she's trying to ascertain is, do they need to do that? Could they achieve the same results through learning hypoxia-based breath work?
Yeah. What are your thoughts? What have you found so far?
I would say yes. And my opinion is, I think she will probably discover, as I think she believes already anyway, that you can achieve the same results. Because really, when you think about it, high altitude training, you're working in a low oxygen environment. When you're practicing intermittent hypoxia, you are doing exactly the same thing. So I suspect the results will be similar.
Nice. So, I mean, look, that'd be great if you don't have to climb a mountain to have that kind of training.
Yeah, well, that could be more fun.
Which is always cool, right? Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying you don't want to, but maybe you don't have the time today to go do that. So you also offer, corporate wellness with breath work and one-on-ones. What's the reception been like for the corporate wellness breath work? And how are you going about approaching people and sharing it for use in that space?
Yeah, so two ways: either going out there and banging on doors, which I don't like doing, but you do have to do that, don't you? Or I've made use of other well-being businesses to get me in the door. And in terms of the response, breathwork has now reached a point where most people have heard of it. They don't all know what it is, nor have they tried it, but most people have heard of it. And they're beginning to hear about some of the benefits. And when you think about the corporate space, both in your country and mine, it is bereft with high stress, anxiety. People are worried about their jobs, whether they're going to lose their jobs. People are worried about overworking. People are experiencing burnout. I think right now, most people are open to anything that will ease the pressure of their job and their work experience. So I had a really interesting corporate workshop not too long ago with ExxonMobil, and a whole load of these techies who were lovely folk. But before the workshop, I had been told that I really need to be on my game, because these people are going to want scientific evidence. They're going to, for every bit of woo-woo fluffy stuff that I'm going to teach them, they're going to question it. So on the car journey, which took me 2 hours to get there, I deliberately ommed. So for 2 hours, inhale, oh, long exhale, om sounds, just did that the whole journey. By the time I got there, I was floating on air, and I knew nothing could have taken me out of that state. The good thing was, these people were nothing like the ones that had been described to me. They were totally open and already had been doing some of these practices anyway. It was amazing. And they were all from different parts of the world as well. They'd all been brought into this one group to experience this 2-hour workshop. So I was having them, I was teaching them other stuff. I teach flow state practice, clinical hypnotherapeutic, positive intelligence, a whole load of different things. But by the end of it, I was having them moving, doing something called the Zen swing. I was having them on the floor, breathing, even doing om sounds. They were doing the whole works, and they were totally open to it and loved it. I think the corporate space needs us. They need us to come in there. It shouldn't be too much of a sell job to get us in there. And maybe we need to just do more promotional work via YouTube, in podcasts, to help get the message out there so that we don't need to bang down doors.
No, for sure. I get it. And that's great. It's great that you're getting that kind of response. It's good that you're reaching out and sharing that work in that space. Where can somebody find out more information about your kind of one-on-one work, and if they were interested in your corporate information, where could they get that?
All on my website, daveflorence.com. So DAVE Florence.com. If they want to get a feel for the stuff that I do, then check out my YouTube channel, and you're going to see lots of me on there talking about a whole load of different stuff, but you'll get a feel for the stuff that I teach. But yeah, my website, Dave Florence, has everything you need. My 10-day program, which starts on the 23rd of January, is in there. You can book one-to-one sessions with me. You can book my corporate stuff as well, all on that one website.
Well, Dave, as I said at the beginning here, I love the YouTube content that you've put out there. I use it myself all the time. Great that we were when it was. I had to laugh when I saw that you were in some of the Facebook groups. I was like, "Was frickin' Dave is here?" I was like, "This is awesome. This is it was amazing. It was pretty exciting." So that's just kind of, I think, how this space works as well. Like, you find somebody that you can relate to. You're very relatable. You give you're very professional, but I think approachable. And I appreciate the work that you've been putting out there. Thank you for showing up today, Dave.
Well, thank you. Like I said at the beginning, I'm very grateful. I really appreciate it. I love the stuff you're putting out there too. So we are connected.
Really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Spiritual Dope Podcast. Stay connected with us directly through spiritualdope.co. You can also join the discussion on Facebook, Spiritual Dope, and Instagram at spiritual_dope. If you would like to speak with us, send us an email through brandon@spiritualdope.co. And as always, thank you for cultivating your mindset and creating a better reality. This concludes the most thought-provoking part of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay fully up to date. Until next time, be kind to yourself and trust your intuition.